On this final Thursday of November 2021, we're looking for ways to keep what's beautiful and transmute what is ugly about today.
This is Jews Talk Racial Justice with April and Tracie,
a weekly show hosted by April Baskin and Tracie Guy Decker.
In a complex world, change takes courage.
Wholehearted relationships can keep us accountable.
I want to wish everyone a happy, grateful Family Day. This last Thursday of November.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I think this is going to be airing on Thanksgiving. Is that right?
Right. Thanksgiving Day.
Yep. All right. Well, let's dive in. The story around Thanksgiving is horrible. And because of that, for me and various other folks, it taints the entire holiday. For reasons we got into in our last year's episode about Thanksgiving. So if you've recently joined us, in our show notes, we will link to that episode if you want to get a background on my take and my concerns associated with the holiday, and the oppression it condones. It's still funny to me. I find it very funny that, and also telling now, that it's not just a dear family member who really loves the beautiful parts of this holiday, but I recently, in a conversation a couple months back with Asan, we're working on getting him a visa so that he can come meet my family and they can meet him. Very important for me to have that happen with my significant other and the person I love. And he mentioned, to my great surprise and slight dismay, I need to get it by early November so I can get a ticket so I can be there with your family for Thanksgiving. This is a wonderful American holiday.
Yeah, it still blows my mind a little bit that your Senegalese partner is excited about Thanksgiving.
It's like, what is this conspiracy? One of the most woke, wonderful people in my life and the love of my life are triangulating me. And so over the past several weeks and couple months, I've been working to reconcile these parts as someone who both holds strong perspectives and who also is in a continual state of evolution, and believe that that's part of the purpose and joy in life, is to continue to evolve and move and shift. And also someone who believes in synchronicity, or explicit and subtle, not so subtle, as well as subtle messages and lessons that come from the natural world, that come from other things people say that are pushing me to continue to evolve. And now, obviously, in the context of, say, racism or certain things, just because there's external pressure doesn't mean inherently that I need to shift my perspective. But when two people I love and who are bringing perspectives that I don't inherently find problematic, and Asan was particularly helpful. He is a partner and a spiritual teacher to me in various ways, and that goes both ways too. And he doesn't know anything about the genocidal tropes associated with the holiday. In his mind, it's an American holiday where families get together, and family in Senegal is extremely important. It's one of the things that drew me to the country. It was not just the family piece, but just relationships in general are so sacred there and very alive and vibrant, I think both because of elements of the culture and also a la the wonderful book Bowling Alone in the States. Also, in terms of industry and economy, Senegal in some ways is, I find, as I think, I can't remember if I've mentioned this on the podcast, I often say this, is depending upon certain things, whether it's cars or technology or home or health, different facets of the society can be likened to different decades past and future in the States, right? And so people aren't bowling alone, to reference that, but people are still very connected in Senegal, and capitalism is alive and well there, but still, as it was when people were still connecting in the 60s and 70s in the States, but there's just different relational tissue. So anyway, to me, I took this as a spiritual sign from the universe. If two people I really love and generally respect and align with, there's something they love about this holiday. And so I've been in a process of reconciling, holding that, and also holding for me with my analysis. I don't want anything to do with this holiday. So just as a kind of a refresher around why it feels problematic to me, that there are some beautiful elements, but to me, co-opting beautiful elements of the human experience to paper over a story of genocide and oppression, or focusing on gratitude in the context of different people still not receiving justice, just doesn't sit well with me, as much as I love those things when they're not tainted by that grotesqueness. And Tracie, you shared a metaphor that I've also often thought of that I think might be worth sharing.
After you and I spoke again about Thanksgiving in recent weeks, not last year, and I was talking to my mom, who also loves Thanksgiving, and she said, I don't even think about the pilgrims. Like, that's not what it's about for me. It's about family, and it's about, being grateful for just my overflowing bounty. That's the word she used. And I said, Mom, that's really lovely. It really is. But, if the Germans had a holiday about family and gratitude, but it was somehow linked historically to Kristallnacht or to a program, like, we wouldn't be okay with that. We wouldn't be okay with them having transformed that genocidal moment.
Oh, that doesn't matter.
We
just like to eat food, and there's this whole story about how we conquered and tortured or how the Jews were helpful for us, and let us retake over bookstores.
Right. Or if it were tied to something about, taking over, about the annexation of Poland, or,
right.
It's hard for me to imagine a Thanksgiving type holiday based on Kristallnacht. But it's not impossible for me to imagine a Thanksgiving type holiday around some moment within the war, right within the Third Reich's reign, and
then them recasting the story as the Jews were so helpful, and it's like, no, you murdered us.
Right.
You murdered us. We're still suffering.
We haven't talked about this before, but right now, while we're talking, and when you're talking about the way that it's been transformed, I'm thinking about language. This is specifically around, because of the way Hassan doesn't know that other background. He just sort of sees where it is now. And I'm thinking about language and the way that different idioms kind of come from a specific thing and then get divorced from that thing. And
also he sees it from his lens, right? So his lens also informs it, which is that he just loves family connection, right? Sorry,
right.
Please continue.
Well, I'm just thinking about so the first thing I thought of was the expression rule of thumb, a good rule of thumb is whatever, and it gives you a baseline. And that idiom originally came from if a man were to beat his wife with a switch or a stick, if it was smaller than his thumb, it was cool. But he might get in trouble if it were bigger. Yeah. Ew. And obviously that has nothing to do with the way that we use the idiom now, but that's where it came from originally. Or the other one that came to mind as I was thinking about what I wanted to share with our listeners, I was like, I don't know if that's the one I want to share. I just did. But the other one that came to mind is actually brouhaha, meaning a cacophony of noise, which is a bastardization of Baruch haba, welcome the one who comes, which is a thing that, so if a group of Jews were together and then someone came in the door, Baruch haba, welcome. And that got bastardized by non-Jews into brouhaha as like a cacophony of like chaos that doesn't make
chaos.
Sense.
Yeah. Ooh.
And that's kind of not cool either, right?
Right.
But one could imagine using the word brouhaha, having no idea where it came from. Before I learned where it came from, I used it to describe, loud and raucous and joyful parties. And I try not to use it anymore. And I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but there feels like something kind of resonant in the way that we want to believe, we Americans want to believe that we can sort of take what's good and the bad stuff doesn't matter. Like we just kind of ghost it. But I don't think that's how it works.
And for me, actually, this is really interesting. So, by the way, just for those who are listening, hopefully maybe on Grateful Family Day, I hope that this is juicy material for you and you're enjoying this intellectual material on this, what will hopefully ultimately be a sweet day. And I want to also let you know that I'm planning on landing in a sweet and just and pithy place here with Tracie. So we're not looking to be Debbie Downers during your family time, despite the fact that there might be very just cause to be. But I think I've found a way to reconcile all of these things.
I'm excited to hear that because I imagine some of our listeners like listening to us right now while they are preparing their stuffing or their cranberry sauce or their turkey or whatever. And like, so.
Yum. Yeah. Okay. So, but before we get, I want to let you know that is coming in this episode. But so first I want to speak to what you were saying, Tracie, right? That so this is an interesting nuance that I want to just toss in here since it came up. Now, what's interesting to me is there absolutely is place and space for certain terms or even something like Thanksgiving to be cleansed of its icky past. My contention is that cleansing has not happened. And so just as you said, when you ignore the ugly stuff, what you're also ignoring is present day trauma and challenge for the descendants of people who have been impacted by genocidal settler colonialism today in structures, right? And that's not okay for me. But it's interesting. Like it's a whole other conversation that I think we could potentially do a whole podcast around, because for me, I kind of take it thing by thing. And I think maybe there are also experts who would challenge me around that, which I welcome. But for instance, like with rule of thumb, there's a way for me in which, I don't know, or things like that. I would want to learn more about that before I make the statement. Where certain things, if collective consciousness in general has shifted enough, and those similar things aren't happening, and there has been truth and reconciliation or some form of healing over time through laws, through actions, through different things that have shifted the moment, I am open to reclaiming different things, but there needs to have been tacitly or explicitly some form of tikkun or spiritual transmutation or transformation that has taken place. And because that hasn't happened for me, so there are certain things where people say, oh, I don't like that has a history. And I'm like, that does have a history. But in my mind, we have actually collectively shifted that dynamic and rewritten that narrative around that thing. So I am comfortable with using that thing, right? So like just an example. So for instance, like with the phrase gypped, as a number of people may know, that's a term that's derogatory of Romani people. And I would say in my mind, people who are a part of that community or descendants of that community still receive disrespect and discrimination. So that's still not a phrase that I feel comfortable using. And also it inherently is based in hate. So like it's inherently based on saying a name of a group of people that they did not decide for themselves and using it. So this is I
It's
think we can
also
have a whole
really,
episode
that
on
one is
this.
super similar to, being Jewed down, right?
Right.
Like he,
Like
which is to,
so
which is used to
right.
say that you were someone bargained against you and made you pay more than you should, or sorry, you negotiated for a lower price. If you Jewed them down, you negotiated for a lower price, which yuck. Ew,
Right. And
no.
something so based in hatred and dehumanization is not something I'm interested in reclaiming. But again, we can get it like footnote for a future episode. There are certain things that to me have partially an icky past, but there's a part of that narrative or that phrase that actually is useful or is neutral or is actually can be reframed as truly empowering and not rooted in dehumanization. So to me, I just want to name this because I know there's a trend in some of our movements and different movement spaces to just completely abolish and do away with certain things. And I'm not so interested in that. I'm interested in transformation and having all options available, but doing the work that we need to do to be able to reclaim that abundance and that possibility, which is a fine tuning thing here. And so that's a good segue to my thoughts about Thanksgiving. And given to me the awful and just inaccurate, it's both horrific in some ways, and then in other ways it's just lazy and not accurate. Like to say we're a nation of pilgrims, both doesn't acknowledge everyone who is descended of people who were kidnapped from Africa and the descendants of indigenous peoples. So that's a stupid thing to say. It literally is just inaccurate. And again, a reminder here: at often, Tracie and I critique behaviors and statements and policies. I do not think the people who make that statement are stupid, which oftentimes people conflate those things. I do not. I think all people, including Tracie and me, are very smart people who have inherited some pretty dumb ideas and behaviors. And as smart, inherently good people, we get to reevaluate those things with some distance and say, maybe that's not a thing I want to do anymore, or I might want to redo that. So, okay. So anyway, so I'm someone who's flexible and is willing to compromise. That's key in this perspective. Okay. There's certain things in this scenario that I'm not willing to compromise on. As of right now, without our country having gone through a truth and reconciliation process around Thanksgiving, let alone in general around Indigenous genocide and also the enslavement of African folks, among lots of other things, the internment of Japanese, like many, many different things. Although there has been some work around that, but collectively there's just a sacred healing body of work that will both be difficult and incredibly liberating for our nation. I think I've done enough work, and I'm so clear in my rejection of the traditional false, misleading, and just kind of hogwashy Thanksgiving narrative. And I felt sort of this nationalistic American pressure to have to relate to that in some way. But I've done enough of my own healing work around it that I am ready to release that, and that it's possible for me to have something on a similar day or the same day, having done enough work to fully release that narrative. But it's not enough to release it. I want to have something else to fill its place. But so in an ideal world, we would just find a different day entirely and lift up the things that we love that was also included in Thanksgiving, but repurpose it in a totally different context. And I know that that's not going to happen in this precise moment. So the other day on Facebook, this woman who I really love, who I feel deeply aligned with, and she has more courage to share her thoughts more openly. Her name's Maria Broom, and she posted the other day, quote, "In spite of brutal colonial history, people love to gather on the last day of November. Let's call it Grateful Family Day." So shout out to Maria Broom. I think if I were to take more time and think about it, I might frame it a little differently. I'm actually a little bit of a metaphysical snob, and I actually think that there are slightly higher or more sophisticated versions of gratitude, but this is sufficient for now. Grateful Family Day. And for me, what I would add, what I've also been thinking about is it's high time, and it's relatively so easy for lots of us, especially for a number of folks who are generally somewhat aligned with the Jews Talk Racial Justice team, to completely release the deceitful narrative about a beautiful colonial past when colonialism is not beautiful, and it was brutal and genocidal, and actually replace it with the truth, which is that this nation has complicated and somewhat dark origins. But this land, Turtle Island, has really beautiful origins around our indigenous history. And in spite of that darkness, thousands, millions of people with each passing generation have put their lives on the line, have poured their heart and soul into building something beautiful in spite of the horror and trauma. And that is something that I genuinely feel very proud of, with my family, with my movement elders, with the amazing people who are listening to this podcast and other folks with whom we collaborate. We are doing healing work to heal what has been broken, to lift up what is beautiful about where we are and where we are going, about what is possible. We are facing difficult odds, and our ancestors. So like part of what I'm saying is in some ways to centralize the people about whom were lies told in the original story, but to say is to honor people of African heritage who were stolen and brought to this land, to honor Native and Indigenous people who were and still are stewards of this land and our collective well-being, and also deeply contributed to the development of the current country we are in. And that feels real and true to me. And so I'm in a place where spiritually, in principle and in spiritually, I am completely releasing the outdated Thanksgiving narrative and lifting up and centering the themes of two people close to me in my life who I deeply love, about what they love, which is connecting with family. One of my family members also wanted to engage in truth and reconciliation around lifting up Native voices. And that is something that in the context of feeling proud of our survival in spite of the odds, and feeling proud of the courage that so many people have and have today around the systems and machines and the daunting task ahead of us, and a lot of us still holding on to the beauty of our dreams around what's possible for us to collectively co-create and heal together. And that's basically where I am right now, is that is I'd love to reframe Thanksgiving basically into Grateful Family Day, and also a day to consider and not savor, to ruminate on bold and exciting revolutionary ideas around what's possible for us and our peoples and our nation collectively, if we're willing to hold tightly to our collective goodness and also look at the darkness, but also look at the light and where we've been heading and where we can go from here. So those are some of my thoughts about it. Tracie, what's on your mind? How does that land with you? Do you have any addendums, edits?
So what's on my mind is our friends who are listening who are, somehow either getting ready to go to someone else's house for Thanksgiving or prepping their own meal because of COVID, they can't go, or, whatever it is, the folks who are in the midst of the day, I'm thinking of them and I'm listening to you. And I want to say, this conversation is not about, making anybody feel bad. That's really not what it's about. And I want to lift up what April was just saying. I learned from April, I really see it modeled from April, the idea of what you focus on grows. And so sort of, if you're hearing April and you're like, yeah, but I love Thanksgiving, like that's okay. We're not trying to make you feel any kind of way. And I think what I'm taking away for now, and I expect I will continue to evolve on this, is the things that I love about Thanksgiving, the gratitude, and the family, especially in the 21st century construction of November and December, which is all about capitalism. It's all about sales. It's all about what can I get and not about thanks for what I have. So so that timing in some ways, I mean, it's a cycle. It's kind of a chicken or egg, is Thanksgiving there as a respite from that, or is it there because of Thanksgiving? I don't know. But my point is, that pause for gratitude is a good thing. And I think what's coming up for me is actually this story, of the apostate Acher, the other one, and one of his former friends sort of said, it's like a pomegranate, and I take what is good and I leave the rind. I leave what is not. And that was, it was a very specific story that I'll link in the show notes if you care to follow it. But the idea that the good and the bad are marbled together and that discernment is essential is a very old idea from within our tradition. And that's what I'm offering up right now.
I want to add to that is that, to me, what in Tracie's fantastic skill of helping folks with the practical piece, is I'm not saying actually leave the rest. It is not benign, and I think it is not sufficient to leave it. What I'm saying is any day, but especially a day when we're given space to really be grateful, that's a perfect time to be grateful. And also that we start to either leverage and lift up the narratives that we already have, or start to create a new narrative for our family and our communities and our country around it ain't always been easy. And we know, and I love what I love about this is the fractal nature of it for ourselves, as we talk about it over Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, for our family systems. The best families have challenges and points of growth and ongoing learning or patterns that need healing, right? And the same is true of our country. And that I actually, for those who can do it, and not that you need to talk about those things, but hold them in your mind. And this is, to me, this is a part of the skill set that's a part of our different training programs and the work that we do. And what I would contend is that this is the source, not immediately, but this is where joy emanates from. A colleague of mine says that she read in a book, that joy is grief turned inside out. What I would say to you is that your grateful family day, this day, can be even sweeter if you hold in some ways that there are stories collectively that we still need to deal with and that we're in the process of dealing with. And in spite of that, I'm also going to place attention, or because of that, I'm going to place attention and notice, proactively, appreciatively notice signs and symbols that demonstrate in real concrete ways that we are co-creating a new narrative and a new future together, and that we have been on that path, and that it's not new, but that we get to bring new vigor to that. And to me, that's always exciting, because to me, before I started having even a heavy critique of Thanksgiving, there's a way at times that gratitude, or the ways it's talked about, feels a little bit shallow to me. So in the spirit of what I first saw modeled, which I appreciated in a mindfulness blessing or prayer from Thich Nhat Hanh, where when he acknowledges the food we have, he doesn't just acknowledge that. He also says, may we demonstrate our gratitude moving forward by working to make this world more whole and just and joyful. Right? And so
I love that.
I would add that piece, right? And so to me, right? And so to me, on this grateful family day, in the context of, to me, all these things fit together beautifully. Making a beautiful meal, coming together virtually or in person if it's safe, to be with people we love and cherish who are most important to us, and to think about our historic, present, and future stories of triumph in the face of adversity. That feels real to me. Like, that feels inspiring, you know?
Especially in the midst of the capitalism that I recently named. So at my Thanksgiving table, my mom, since I was little, like you go around the table and you say what you're grateful for. Like, it's a thing, and you can't pass. You cannot pass. But I think, based on what you just said from the Thich Nhat Hanh blessing, I'm going to ask that we say not just what we're grateful for, but how we will demonstrate that gratitude moving forward. Because I think that I don't know, that feels really beautiful and transformative. So that to make sure that the gratitude is not just thank you, but actually a transformational, even in subtle ways, which we know science tells us actually changes reality. Social scientists have said that the happiest people are the most grateful people, and
people from so many different fields. Yes.
It's not just our happiness at stake, right? It's a lot more.
And I think for various folks, not for everyone, I think for younger, but it feels burdensome at times to acknowledge all of that bounty. So I think it can actually create like this balanced experience where we can feel peace of mind to be in relationship around the receiving, to say, and I'm going to use that extra energy, not for excess, although some of it's good to savor. I'm not saying there isn't a purpose and divinity in that, but I'm also going to use it in different ways, because I think, especially with our crowd, certain folks, since I was younger, like it felt a little burdensome. Like, what do I do with all of, like, and so now what? Like, right? And so I think that there's also a way in which I think that's a great idea, basically. And I think it's good not only because we should do it, but I think it actually could bring relief and comfort of like, right, I'm gaining all of this at a time when we know that we're not yet in the world to be where everyone has their needs met. So it's all the more important. But even when everyone has their needs met, ideally we get different. It's a divine balance of giving and receiving. And right now, if we're in a process of receiving and noticing what we've received, it also helps to, I think, balance us out spiritually to also think about, and how am I going to leverage this? How am I going to share this joy, which I believe spiritually, metaphysically, then further grows the joy, actually. It further grows it in the process of sharing. And so this feels like pretty exciting to me, Tracie. Like, I really like the arc of this place, right? Because for me, I really don't like to stay in the place where I've been for the last few years, but I needed to work through and reconcile and release different icky things, but I don't like to just stay there. I like to land in a place where I'm like, this is good fuel direction. I have a map for moving forward that now makes sense and now feels accountable and joyous and just. So with all of that in mind, We wish you a most joyful, grateful family day, or whatever you most find it meaningful to call it. Thanks for tuning in. Our show's theme music was composed by Elliot Hammer. You can find this track and other beats on Instagram at Elliot Hammer. If this episode resonated with you, please share it and subscribe. To join the conversation, visit JewsTalkRacialJustice.com, where you can send us a question or suggestion, access our show notes, and learn more about our team. Take care until next time, and stay humble and keep going.